Hey everyone, I wanted to do a super quick video on a really specific quirk or use case for radio buttons versus checkboxes and dropdowns. Here's an example of the typical differences in the use cases for each of these components. Radio button is great for making a single selection from a relatively small list of options. For example, selecting a plan type. Checkboxes are great for selecting multiple options of things in a list. Topics of interest, for example, we could like multiple things. And dropdowns are typically used for single selections of an option in a list where there's a lot of options. So, for example, a country where every country in the world is available. That would be a really long list of radio buttons. And there's also a use case for checkboxes where you're basically making a binary declaration. So yes, I have done something. In this case, yes, I have read and accept the terms and conditions. So that's a broad overview of why you might use one of these components over the other. But the example I'm going to jump into today gets a little more specific than that. Now here's something I prepared earlier. Imagine this is a form about your income, let's say. And one of the questions in this form is whether you earn more or less than $1,000 a week. So if we want to find out that information from a user, there are a few ways that we could ask that question. One such example, a checkbox that basically gets them to declare whether they earn $1,000 or less per week. This is actually something that I built and tested at my workplace. We went to user testing with this solution and we thought it would be relatively straightforward. What we found during the testing was that people were a little confused about the way that this was worded and the way that it was presented to them. So we verbally heard them saying things like, oh, I earn $1,500 a week, so do I click this button? I earn $1,000 a week or less. Maybe I don't click this button. And then they would turn to us and say, do I click this button or not if I earn this amount of money? What we found is that this was ripe for the misinterpretation. It wasn't very clear exactly what they should do based on what they earned. And the problem this caused is that both of these answers, whether this checkbox is checked or unchecked, both of these could be correct from the system's point of view. So they could click this and then submit the form, or they could leave it unchecked and they could submit the form. We had no way of telling whether they had read and understood what they were declaring with this checkbox. So we changed the design and we retested this solution. It's basically the same question, except now we're using radio buttons to declare whether they earn less than $1,000 a week or more than $1,000 per week. And this solved many problems for us. First of all, it solved the misunderstanding problem. They could clearly see that one option was I earn $1,000 or less per week, and the other option in contrast was I earn more than $1,000 a week. So depending on which category they fell into, they could very easily see which option they should select. The other added benefit here is that, for example, if all of these fields are required on this page before they can submit the form, we can actually tell whether they have missed this field. So if we compare this to the checkbox, where they can submit this form whether it's checked or unchecked, if we jump to radio buttons, if they try to submit this without selecting an option, we can throw up an error that says you must actually make a selection here. And this actually came up in the user testing as well, where they missed this option altogether. So this way we can make sure that they see both options and they make an explicit decision. There's also a third option here, which is to use a drop-down, and that's very similar. It has all the same benefits as the radio button. It allows them to make an explicit choice between the two options, and it allows us to actually validate that they have made a selection. The reason that I personally would opt for radio buttons over a drop-down is because the radio button makes these two options always visible. So I can very easily see what my selection is compared to the other options at all times. Whereas the drop-down, this actually hides both selections until I activate the drop-down. Then I make a choice and it hides the other options. So there you have it. There is my quick little scenario on when you might choose to use radio buttons versus a checkbox. I hope this helped you. Thank you so much.